Development and Philanthropy. I'm thrilled to be joined today by one of PCA's National Advisory Board member and the head coach at Notre Dame, Mike Brey. Coach Brey, thanks so much for joining us today.
Great to be with you. Love what y'all are doing at PCA. I'm honored to be part of it.
Great, awesome. And I'm thrilled to introduce my colleague and teammate, PCA's Vice President for External Relations, Casey Miller. And I'm going to turn it over to Casey, who will lead the conversation today with Coach Brey. And just a reminder, enter your questions in the chat box on the webinar. And if you're following along on Facebook, feel free to comment on questions there. But Casey and Coach Brey, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Jason. Coach Brey, I think the last time we saw each other in person was maybe 4 years ago at your offices there in Notre Dame, and the world's a little different in 2020.
Yes.
And just want to say again, thank you for making time for PCA. And first, just ask, how are you doing? How is the team doing given all this uncertainty in 2020, given the pandemic and all the things happening in the world? How's the vibe? How are you?
So I'm driving home. You'll love this. I'm driving home from our Duke loss last night. And I didn't think we really competed on the defensive end well. And I don't want to say I was negative in the locker room after the game, but I was firm and challenging. And I'm thinking maybe I need a little PCA therapy today before we meet for practice here in about 2 hours. Overall, though, given what's going on in the world, we played 5 basketball games to date. Our group was back and got through the first semester academically together. We've, knock on wood, we've tested negatively for a pretty darn good run, and we test multiple times a week. But I think the mental health aspect of our kids being able to be together, the mental health aspect for me as the teacher to be able to work with them, I think we talked about as a coaching staff when the season started and it was unknown, games canceled, how many are going to play, would they shut the season down and pause? Who knows? We're living day to day. We just felt like to be really clued into what the mental health of our young people. I think it's taken a toll on them. It's been a big punch in the gut.
Absolutely.
To what they maybe would want to experience. And so to just kind of have their back and be with them and try and let them get better, and that they have their basketball outlet, I think it's been very positive for them.
Yeah, and a lot of the people that you work with, the students that you work with, they're wired for competition, right? And I think about the youth and high school coaches that might be tuning in and the parents that might be tuning into this webinar who they don't have competition yet. And so can you talk about, back when there were no games and there was all this uncertainty, you have these competitive athletes, what are some of the things that your staff and you did to proactively kind of manage that mental health that is so important for youth athletes that, again, many of them are dealing with currently still at that younger level?
Yeah, great question. I know there's still a lot of high schools in that level are on hold and waiting till after the first of the year to get started. And we didn't have our group together in the summer. We always are here for summer school, but that was obviously shut down. And what I tried to do was get on a Zoom with them once a week to talk to them and talk about when we come back, because summer school was canceled, but we were coming back to school in August and we're going to get together. Thankfully, our strength coach had communicated with them their workouts, because we lost all our strength training that we do in the summer in our facility here on campus. And they really did a good job. These kids have done a good job finding gyms and places to get to eventually, to work out. But I thought they needed to see my face and they needed to see me upbeat about the season and our team. And God knows, as the leader, sometimes you're faking that a little bit, right? There are days where my 45 minutes in front of them, I can't say I went into it feeling the greatest about the world and the future, but I was trying to give them stuff to hang their hat on. And I think that would be so important for our high school coaches. It's around the corner. And I tried to talk about our schedule a lot. Hey, we're going to add this game and we're playing Kentucky and we're going to play Ohio State, ACC Big Ten Challenge. And here's our repeat opponents. We played Duke twice and Virginia twice. I kept trying to give them things to look forward to and hang their hat on when they got back. And again, as I said, as the leader, sometimes sometimes you've got to manufacture that enthusiasm when you're in front of your group.
Absolutely. I think that's such good advice for youth coaches that are tuning in. And I also want to ask too, are there positive things that you've learned over the last 7 months that might influence what you do in the future? Let's say the world goes back to normal. What are some of the things that you've learned and how, maybe it's player development or working with your staff that might continue, when the world is back to normal?
What I've found is, I think, as a coach, your goal is always to kind of have a group take ownership of itself. Certainly when you have great leadership, they take ownership of themselves. And I thought this group, and I have a little bit of an older group now, they've grown up together. I thought they've really done a good job of that, because we weren't there to interact with them as much. And what they did with each other in the summer, and then what they did here, when we got back, because we didn't have everybody in the gym right away because of the protocols and all those things. So I almost learned to trust our leadership a little bit to kind of run our group and to get feedback from them. What do you think we should do today in practice? And what do you think? What are you concerned about? I think I've always been tuned into that, but even more so to listen to them and to talk about whatever they needed to talk about. In the midst of the pandemic through the summer, we had the George Floyd situation in Minneapolis. We had all the uproar there. And so in the midst of not being with them, we had some really heart-to-heart talks where I have a team where I have 6 black players and 6 white players. It made a very interesting and powerful conversation about what is going on in the world and what do we do moving forward. And we never touched on basketball, which was awesome, which was what we should not have touched on basketball. And I learned more about our guys because they expressed themselves about different issues in the world and social injustice. I learned more about my guys through that dynamic in the summer. So it was, the management of, a lot of different information being thrown in the midst of a crisis.
Totally. And I mean, this is just another reason that we're so proud that you're involved with PCA. And we recently launched an initiative called Sports Can Battle Racism. And we have come up with a curriculum in collaboration with some of our staff members and board members to really empower coaches to have those conversations with their teams and create change in their communities. And so I'm curious, this high level coach, what are some of the ways that you went about having those conversations with your team at those important moments when you weren't talking about basketball?
Well,
is there anything you could share as advice for youth coaches?
Well, 24 hours after, the situation in Minneapolis, we got on a Zoom, and I opened up the floor a little bit, and 2 of my assistants kind of broke the ice. And they're both young men that played for me, and both African American. And so they kind of broke the ice and really got our kids expressing themselves about things. And there's 3 or 4 that didn't say a word. It was maybe a little much for them. And there were 6 or 7 that were very vocal, some angry. And I think we've all learned, as the leader, you learn to manage and diffuse and help kids express. What we did in the midst of it is schedule a game at Howard University. Power 5 schools don't play on HBCU campuses much. But Howard University coach, I coached at Duke and recruited him there, and is a good friend and like a son to me. And we had decided to do a home and home anyways, but I called Kenny Blakeney at Howard in June, and I said, Kenny, we need to come there. And he wanted us to come on MLK Day. And we are going there in the midst of the ACC season. Now, that's really cool, and I hope the game takes place. DC has got their spike in numbers. It's going to be a Fox national game on Martin Luther King Day in the afternoon, Notre Dame at Howard. But what we did is both teams connected with WWAV, When We All Vote, a Michelle Obama initiative. And they registered themselves and worked to recruit to register other people. And obviously, we've talked then after the election when we had the huge turnout of voting of how, like, fellas, you were part of that, man. Like, we jumped in that and you were on the front lines of that. And you were recruiting people to register. And it's really was a neat thing with the Howard kids and to do something in the midst of this. And again, I hope the game takes place and it's safe and we can get there on MLK Day. And that'll be a very special day, for a lot of reasons. But I thought it gave us we expressed ourselves about frustration with what was going on, but we said, you know what are we going to do about it? Well, we are going to, around this game, we are going to join up with When We All Vote, that initiative, and we are going to register people. And that's how you change things. And I thought our kids felt some gratitude the day after the election when I said, fellas, did you see the turnout and the numbers and who voted? You guys were part of that, man. We were part of that initiative. So, that was one thing that I thought helped us, handle the crisis that was the double crisis, the double crisis that was going on in the world.
Well, and I think it just highlights, again, this unique platform that sports brings in that it unites people from different backgrounds. When you have a coach who prioritizes teaching life lessons and building better people, there is no other place other than sports where you can really make an impact like that. And I've heard you say, sports, basketball is just a vehicle to create better men. And so I kind of want to shift gears a little bit and talk about Positive Coaching Alliance. Obviously, we provide resources and training, character education training to youth coaches, parents, athletes, but specific to the coaches, recent research shows that only 35% of youth and high school coaches are trained in character education. There's obviously X's and O's, concussion, safe sport, all very important things. But when it comes to empowering coaches to teach life lessons through sports and build better people, only 35% are trained. And so I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on how can we make it so at some point, every single coach needs to go through that type of training when they go to coach youth basketball or high school basketball or any level.
Well, I applaud you on that. And I couldn't emphasize that enough. To have some training in that department, I think would be really helpful as we handle those young people. And our youth coaches, our youth coaches are on the front lines of education. Let's be honest. I'm getting these guys a little older, right? But so many of the guys I'm coaching have had youth coaches that have had a huge impact on them. And that message of how to be a good dude, man, how to be a good guy, and how to be a good teammate, and how to be upbeat, and how to be enthusiastic, and all of those things, how to make good decisions. I would say that is so important, and hopefully, you can get more youth coaches getting trained and just getting exposed to that, so they get some ideas. Well, but I'll say this: I think I have run into, because I've been in the business a long time. You go watch a high school coach, you go watch an AAU coach run a practice, and at the end, he wraps up practice and he's talking about who you are as a person and your attitude and how you treat your mother and father and how you are respectable. And I've walked out inspired by the talks that high school coaches and AAU coaches have given to their team about life lessons, not necessarily how to make a left-handed layup at the end of a practice.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I saw a question that just came in. Somebody asked, does PCA provide character education training? We do. And we'll put that in the chat for you guys. And if those of you who are tuning in, whether that's on Facebook or via this webinar, if you type your questions in the Q&A on the webinar, we'll make sure we get to them. And then on the Facebook in the comments section. And that also reminded me, Coach Tara Vanderveer of Stanford just broke that amazing record in women's basketball. Yeah. We were going back and looking through some of her resources that she's provided PCA, and she talks about how she doesn't remember scores of games, right? She remembers the teams that she coaches and the individuals and what they say 15 years after they, come back and tell her what the impact of their time at Stanford has meant to them. And so, along those lines, what do you hope your players say about their experience after 4 years at Notre Dame?
Well, that's a great example with Tara and all the young women that have come through. I haven't quite been at Stanford or at Notre Dame as long as Tara at Stanford, but 21 years is a pretty good run. And it's 55 young men that have come through, graduated, and have moved on. And they're all like sons to me. And I want that relationship. And the pressure I feel, certainly we got to win enough or they'll tell me to go coach somewhere else. I get all that. The pressure I feel is I want them to have a good experience. That first team meeting, you're looking, I got 12 guys looking at me and they have unbelievable dreams. Some maybe not completely realistic. That's my job to help them with that. But I look at that and I go, now that's the pressure. They all want to have a great experience. And so 55 young men have come through here, and every one of them, you know, I can remember stories about them, things they do. They said, how many times does this happen to a teacher? It happens all the time with me. I'm an older teacher now. Kids will come back and go, hey, coach, remember that time you pulled me aside and you said that to me? And you know what? I don't remember it completely. But that is the power and the impact we have as educators. They hang on every word, our body language. And so before I go into my group, you know, I try and gather and go, all right, here you go, you're on. And to know that they are reading everything. So certainly like Coach Vanderveer, you know, when you have a family of guys out there that have graduated and they're out and that they feel comfortable always coming back and calling. You know, when you have 55 guys out there, that's a lot of guys that need you later in life.
Yep.
And when a player calls me or texts me, I stop everything. Like if a former player calls, we need it, I'm on it. What do you need? And I think that's part of what we owe them. And you know, quite frankly, I've seen many high school coaches and youth coaches and AAU coaches that have that relationship with their guys long after. They check in, hey, coach, you know, and he's there for them. And that's the cool stuff. When they come back as young men and you see them older and a little more of a finished product than when they walked in the door at 18, family, children, and you can laugh with them a little bit and talk about, they tease you about the dumb things you did at halftime sometimes.
Yep.
That's what it's all about. That's what it's all about.
And when you're looking at adding, you know, a young man to that, you know, roster of people who have been through your amazing program, if you were to share, you know, maybe 2 qualities that really stand out when you're recruiting someone outside, again, of, you know, dribbling, shooting, anything like that, what are 2 qualities where if you see that in someone, you're like, I want that guy on my team?
You know, I think I mentioned a little earlier, you know, is the young man, is he a good teammate? How does he interact? How does he interact with his teammates? How does he interact with his coach? How does he interact with his parents, or his brother and sister, as you learn and spend a lot of time in the recruiting process, getting to know a young man and his family? Just, you know, what kind of guy is he? What kind of, you know, is he need to be around? You know, is he a wet blanket that just brings the whole room down? You know, what kind of young person is he? And you know, so I again, they have to have the basketball ability. There's no question about it. But to have some, you know, some upbeat, some personality. Yeah, I love a sense of humor. That, you know, I like to kid with our guys and when the time is right. And is there a sense of humor? Are they communicators? You know, one thing I have found a little bit, because these cell phones, these kids text so much, getting them to talk and getting them to look you in the eye is really important. I had a team rule a couple of years ago where I said, you can't text me. You must call me or come see me. I'm not going to respond to text. I got to hear your voice, or you got to come see me face to face, you know, because I just thought guys we did too much of that. And we all fall into that trap at the same time. Right. But the looking people in the eye and communicating and yeah, I think is a big thing. And man, are you kind of cool to be around? And guys want to be around you? You know, that you know, we're in this thing 5-6 months together in a basketball season. Man, do we spend a lot of time together.
Yes. Yep, exactly. Well, speaking of communication, we had a question come in from somebody in the webinar, which I think is a great one. They asked, can you talk a bit about your philosophy of always seeming to be calm on the sidelines? How do you as a coach encourage intense performance in a huddle while you maintain a calm exterior and demeanor?
Well, Casey, I can tell you one thing. When we got beat off the dribble a couple times last night in the second half, it was fake calm, but at least it was calm on the outside. In the huddles now, I may have ratcheted it up a little bit, but my feeling has been when my guys look over at me, they cannot see a guy yelling at the refs, yelling at them. Am I poised? Actually, all my emails to our players and their parents through the summer and the pandemic was titled Poise, Not Panic. As I was giving them information on here's when the semester is going to start, here's testing. Parents, kid, poise, not panic. And I've tried to really live like that when you interact with your group, to be calm. And as the leader, as I've mentioned, sometimes you got to fake that a little bit. Inside, you're doing backflips, but the outside exterior that, my point guard looks over and goes, well, he's okay. I guess we're all right, even though we're down 6 with 3 minutes to go.
Yeah, well, it reminds me too, Brad Stevens, the Celtics coach, he's involved with PCA as well. And he talks about how he feels it's important to stay calm so that when his players, they look at him, they see him calm, they'll play poised. If they see him, he's freaking out, they're going to play freaking out. So I think it's a great message to youth and high school coaches in terms of trying to keep that calm demeanor, even if internally you're not calm.
Yeah, you just gotta grin and bear it sometimes, but that outside, how many times that's okay, get on to the next one, we'll be all right. And then down deep, sometimes you're going, oh my God, we're in trouble. But I'm not going to tell them that yet.
Right. Well, and that actually brings me to the next question, which, positive coaching lines. Sometimes people hear positive coaching and they think fluff, everyone gets a trophy, soft. I'm very competitive. Everyone who works at PCA is very competitive. I played college basketball. What, in your words, does positive coaching mean to you?
Ken, I kind of evolved into this phrase with our program about 7-8 years ago. Be a confidence giver. Be a confidence giver, whether it's a 12-year-old or a 20-year-old. If you can give confidence and get guys to feel they can do stuff, it's amazing what young people can do when they feel it. And so that has kind of been our theme. Now, that does not mean that we are not firm and challenging at times. But today, our practice will be firm and challenging. But when they leave the gym, nobody's going to leave the gym with their heads down. I'm going to find something good to talk about as we move toward another game on Saturday after a tough loss last night. But there's no question, giving confidence, helping them believe. I love showing video. When we watch film, I never end it with bad stuff. Never. Now, sometimes in games, you can't find there's much good stuff, right? But we may go through mistake, but end it on 3 plays like, see, I told you we could do it. I told you we could do it. We can do this. Why didn't we do it in the first half last night? Come on, I know we can do this. Here it is. I've seen you do it. Why didn't you talk on defense? You did at Kentucky last Saturday. Why didn't you last night? I don't understand that. But so you show them, and it's a little bit of, we've done it before, we can do it, and prod them that way, just give confidence. Give confidence.
Be a confidence giver. I love that.
Be a confidence giver.
And we're getting a window into why you're such an amazing coach, which I love. So a good question from Amber, who was asking, what do you do when you are starting to get to know your players to help them open up and communicate with you? What are some of those tools that you use to get your players to open up?
Sense of humor to disarm them. Total sense of humor to disarm them. Sit with them in different areas. Don't call them into I don't like calling them into here, because my office is a little bit of a position of power. And so they already we're going to the principal's office. Sit with them, have a workout, grab them in the weight room, sit on the bench in the weight room and talk to them there, bump them in the training room, give them, just something to disarm them and loosen them up, and then if you can get that, then maybe you can get your point in instead of coming right with your point. Try and break that ice a little, and then maybe at the end you've made 2 points. So they've got to see in different settings. The pandemic has put a cramp in this. I like getting to my house more, but we haven't done that as much. We're going to do it on Christmas Eve because they're not going home for Christmas. I got to keep them here because we're going to stay for the first time ever at Christmas. So we're doing Christmas Eve dinner at my house. And I have 12 moms very upset that their boys will not be home for Christmas, but given the protocols and the pandemic, it's probably best for us to stay in our bubble here and play our games before and after Christmas. So, but just be real and you don't have to be that I think most kids, when they make a mistake, we've got a little bit of a generation of they're afraid to make a mistake. And when they do, they know it right away. So you don't really have to jump on them. I've been on, can you get on to the next play? Can you get on to the next play? We have a phrase in it's actually a mannerism, power clap. Power clap. Made a mistake. I just threw it and hit one of the cheerleaders in the back of the head. Turnover. Next play. Let's go. Get back. Don't hang your head. Let's go. Next play. Power clap, and we're back. And we'll practice it at the 10-minute mark before. I hear them. They're in there. I'm not in the locker room. My captain, apprentice sub will go power clap on 3. 1, 2, 3. They do it before we go out because we're going to have to do it in a game. Stuff happens.
And you have to practice.
How do you move on? How do you move on to the next one?
Every coach can take that, a power clap. That's a great mistake ritual, a power clap and then move on. Well, we want to thank you so much for joining us. We're honored to have you serve on PCA's National Advisory Board since 2014. It's been 6 years, which is crazy. And you're just the epitome of a positive coach and someone that we want to hold up as a role model to other youth and high school basketball coaches. And so we appreciate your time with us today. And for the questions that we didn't get to, we can follow up with you one-on-one after the fact, but encourage you to visit PCA, positivecoach.org, and also tune into Notre Dame's game versus Purdue on Saturday. And of course, on MLK Day at Howard, we hope that game happens. But that's such a special, special moment. And Coach Brey, thank you again. We love having you.
Casey, always honored to be with PCA. Take care of yourself, be safe, and happy holidays to everybody.
Awesome. Happy holidays.
See you.